In practice, we must help ourselves. Teachers can tell us only the way, but the journey must be made by our own self. Being flippant doesn't bring us any good. If we do the mental development bhavana with the wish to be liberated from suffering and get the normal path and fruit and nirvana in this life, we must be determined to be resolute. If we do it like an amateur, by doing when we want or when we are diligent, but quitting when we are lazy, it will not work. It's like paddling upstream. The water isn't still, but rapid. The stream of defilements is rapid. When paddling upstream, we have to patiently keep up on paddling. Don't stop. Whenever we stop, we go backwards and are swept away by the water flows. Those who have practiced and get satisfactory results by being liberated from suffering step by step have the endurance. For those who practice on and off, it doesn't work. The same principle applies to monks and laymen. It's to fight without quitting. Fighting then and retreating will never win. Determination to be resolute is very important. Determination to be resolute and then perseveringly do the mental development. Be patient. There are many obstacles along the way. Sometimes there are beasts like crocodiles trapping a river. Sometimes there are beautiful things along the bank. We are caught and trapped. If we are unable to fight, we are defeated. The cycle of rebirth is long because we walk forward and then backward. Due to walking forward and backward, the cycle of rebirth is long and never ending. If we are determined to be resolute, when we have found Buddhism in this life, we'll make sacrifices in this life. Our main job we determine to do is to elevate our mind to be liberated from defilements and to be liberated from suffering. It doesn't matter how much you'll be liberated. Let's fight. When we fight, it doesn't matter how many % that will work. Don't worry. Just keep fighting and do our best. It's okay to lose, but we have to start the battle. If we give up before starting the big battle, we'll fail. Look at the history of the Buddha and the disciples. They didn't do it for only one life. They did it for a long time, especially those with special qualities like the foremost disciples. They did it for 100,000 Mahakappa. They did it for a long time. The chief disciples did it for a long time too. They fought. The Buddha did it for an incalculable period of time. At least for Ansakya times 100,000 Mahakappa. And Ansakya is approximately 10 to the power of 148. One Mahakappa is one cycle of the universe rise and fall. It took time. But for ordinary disciples, it wasn't that much. In our case, our faculties are weak, and our merits aren't much. We were born in the Middle Ages of religion. We have some merit, but not much. If we want to get good things, we must patiently and perseveringly do the mental development. Near the shore is near nirvana, little by little. Let's determine to keep on practicing no matter how many years it will take. Just keep on practicing our best. If we practice but not get the noble path and fruit in this life, it's alright. Born to be a fighter, we have to fight. When we fight, it doesn't matter to win or lose. If we fight, we may lose today, but we have a chance to win in the future. I used to meet one master. I paid obeisance to him with my full respect. He said to me, I was with the headmaster. Those in the same generation were already liberated from the suffering, while I didn't get anything, even the first stage of holiness, Sotapanna. However, I shall not quit. Even if it must take 100 lives, I shall keep on practicing. No matter what, I shall not retreat. This is the mind of a true practitioner. If like this, like a warrior, it doesn't matter to win or lose. We have to fight. If we are weak and on and off in practicing, we'll get just that. We can't say the Dhamma of the Buddha isn't really good. We can't say that because we've not practiced Dhamma with righteousness. Therefore, we must intend that when having found Buddhism in this life, we shall fight our best. The job that earns a living for taking care of ourselves and our family is the job for living with the world. But our main job is to do the mental development in order to be liberated from the world. We have to make a living because we still have to live with the world. Keep doing the duty to make a living. But deep inside, we have to know that this is just a secondary job. The main job is to do mental development. I'll tell us countless times that I wasn't good at it. But I was patient in training myself. There was a deep feeling inside. I was born to live this life. Why was I born in a pile of suffering? Did I have to live in the pile of suffering forever? My mind felt that it had to fight. Therefore, I never stop and never retreat from doing the mental development. Since childhood, I met Luangpu Pramote and studied at Asokharam temple. He taught me to do the chanting, Putto, to breathe in, Put, and to breathe out, To. I did it without quitting. I'd done it in the way that I didn't see the future, but I didn't quit. It's like Pamaha Jakana swimming. He didn't quit swimming. In spite of not knowing where the shore was, he didn't quit. I don't compare myself to Pramaha Jakana. I can't compare. However, my heart was like that. I studied with Luangpu. He taught me to breathe in, put, and to breathe out, To. I did it every day. The mind was tranquil sometimes and restless sometimes. I'd been struggling along, but I didn't quit. After I'd practiced for a long time, my mind gradually became more powerful to the extent that the known outstandingly appeared. Therefore, I'd been able to separate the aggregates, kanta, since I was a layman. Before meeting Luangpu Pramote Pamojjo, my mind could be stable as a nova. It could be stable as a nova because I'd seen that the body and the mind wasn't the same one. When keeping on doing the mental development every day, one day we'll see the body disappear completely, but the mind still remains. When the body comes back, we'll know that the body and mind are not the same one. At that time, I didn't know how to watch other people. I didn't know how other people were. I thought that other people were like me. In my feeling, the body was something that had moved and was something that had been known and watched. The mind was stable like that, but I didn't know the path to go further. I knew only how to do the samadhi to the extent that the mind could be stable. At first, I did it wrong. It was samadhi that caused the mind to go out knowing and seeing various things. Some true, some lies, but none could be trusted and had a sense. When I met Luangpu Pramote, he taught me to watch the mind and said, "You've read a lot of books. From now on, read your own mind." Before meeting Luangpu Pramote, I'd read a lot of books, the Tipitaka. I read them over and over again, many times, to search for the method of how to begin practicing. But I couldn't find one. There were many textbooks. For samatha, tranquility development, there were dozens of methods. For vipassana, wisdom cultivation, I didn't know how to do it. I knew only the sutras chapter by chapter, the foundation of mindfulness, the sutra of setting in motion the view of the doctrine, the sutra of non-self, etc. But they didn't lead me to the practice. I didn't understand. When I met Luangpu Pramote, he pointed directly to the mind and taught me to practice and learn into the mind. When I learned the mind, it was like I got the key to the practice. The mind was something I'd already seen since childhood, but not knowing how important it was. When Luangpu had taught me to watch the mind, I kept on observing it. Finally, the mind was stable. Once I known the mind does the thinking, the mind became stable. When stable, it said, "Oh, this one was the same old one. I'd been able to do this one, the stable mind, since childhood." At first, I didn't understand what Luangpu had taught. He told me to watch the mind. When seeing the stable mind, I stared at the stable mind and kept the mind to stay still like that, in order to make it empty and bright. Then, when I'd sent my homework to Luangpu, he said to me, "You made a mistake. The mind has the natural to think and to fabricate things. Don't train it not to think and not to fabricate things. Don't train it to stay still knowing. The mind that stays still knowing won't result in wisdom because it's samadhi, the samatha." After having a stable mind, in the beginning, I'd seen that the body wasn't my own self. It was something that had been known and watched. It wasn't the mind. When Luangpu Pramote had built on my practice by pointing to the mind, I got the path to go further. After seeing the mind working, I'd gradually seen that the happiness, suffering, good or evil arising in the mind wasn't the mind. It was like what I'd seen in the beginning, that the body wasn't the mind. When watching the mind, I'd seen that the happiness arising was not the mind, but it was something that was known by the mind. The suffering wasn't the mind. Indifference, neither happiness nor suffering, wasn't the mind. The greed, anger, delusion, distraction, depression, drowsiness, etc. wasn't the mind. But it was something that was known and watched. The mind was the knower and the watcher. But here, there is a point to be careful. When we separate the feeling, vedana, the mind formation, sankhan, such as good and evil fabrication, and the mind from each other, don't keep the mind to stay still. If we deliberately keep the mind to be happy, peaceful, or good, we made a mistake. It becomes the samatha. We'll see the body is one part, the feeling is another part, the mind formation is another part, and the mind is another part. We'll see each part perform its own function. The body performs its function. Inhaling, exhaling, standing, walking, sitting, lying down. It performs its job. Don't interfere. If we interfere, such as sitting in a position, walk this kind of posture, breathe in this rhythm, or something like that, it becomes samatha immediately. When watching the feeling, happiness, suffering, or indifference arising, we'll see that all happiness, suffering, indifference is something that is known and watched. It arises, exists, and falls. When mindfully aware of the body, we'll see the body is impermanent, anicca, unsatisfactory, dukkha, and non-self, anatta. When aware of the feeling, we'll see the feeling is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-self. When aware of the mind formation, we'll see that the greed, anger, delusion arises uninvited. It pops up on its own. We can't prevent it from popping out of the middle of our chest. It can't be prevented. Whether the defilements or wholesomeness will pop up, we can't command or choose. Keep on knowing and watching it. Then, we'll see that all mind formation, whether good or evil arises, exists, and falls. It's not under compulsion. It's impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-self. After we keep knowing and watching for a long time, when watching the body, we have the mind to watch the body. When watching the feeling, we have the mind to watch the feeling. And when watching the mind formation, we have the mind to watch the mind formation. In every situation, there is the mind acting as the knower and watcher. Everything, whether the body, feeling, or mind formation, that is known or watched, is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-self all the same. Keep on watching it over and over again for months and years. Keep on watching it over and over again. However, we can't watch it straight through. When cultivating wisdom, we watch the three characteristics, trailakkhana, of body and mind, rupa and nama. The body, feeling, mind formation, and mind. We'll see the three characteristics from time to time, not all the time. When cultivating wisdom, soon the mind will be exhausted. When exhausted, the mind will stop cultivating wisdom. Sometimes I contemplate Dhamma very smoothly. However, once reaching the point where it runs out of power, it stops abruptly. Even though I trust it to keep on contemplating, it doesn't continue to do it. The mind stops because the mind is non-self as well. It can't be commanded. Therefore, when cultivating wisdom, we don't do it non-stop. When cultivating wisdom for a little while, the mind will be exhausted. When the mind is exhausted, come back to make it tranquil again. Do samadhi again. Yesterday, I taught quite a lot about samadhi. Yesterday, I taught about loving kindness. When we keep on developing the loving kindness, we'll get the samadhi up to the 7th absorption. The absorption of a formless sphere. Loveless kindness isn't a small thing. When we develop wisdom until the mind becomes distracted and exhausted, don't force it. If we develop the wisdom with insufficient samadhi, the wisdom won't arise, but the distraction will arise. The distraction is the delusion, moha. It's another name of distraction. Another name of wisdom is the non-delusion, amoha. Therefore, when the mind has the delusion, wisdom can't be developed no matter what. The mind with the delusion is the mind with the distraction. The mind that is lethargic and exhausted, or the mind that doesn't perceive any sense objects, has the delusion. The mind that hesitates on how to do things has the delusion too. When the mind has the delusion, the wisdom can't be developed, because the wisdom and the delusion are opposite of each other. Therefore, at the time of wisdom cultivation, when the mind is exhausted, come back to do samatha. Don't force it. Forcing doesn't bring any benefit. We'll be more distracted. Luangpu Pramote Pamojjo used to say, there is a thin line between wisdom cultivation and distraction. When the mind cultivates wisdom, the mind is working. When the mind is distracted, the mind is working. If the mind has samadhi while the mind is working, wisdom will arise. However, if the mind doesn't have samadhi, the mind that works by sending outwards is distracted. Therefore, samadhi is the immediate cause of wisdom. At the time the mind contemplates Dhamma, once lacking the samadhi, it becomes distracted. When knowing and watching the body, feeling and mind formation that fabricates good and evil, with the knowing and the watching mind, we won't interfere with the knowing and watching mind. We just know that it does exist, but don't stare at it. Keep being mindfully aware of the body. We'll see the body is something that is known. We have the mind to be separate one who knows. We don't intentionally come back watching the mind, but just know that it's a separate one. Watching the feeling or the mind formation is the same. Whether the body, feeling, or mind formation, we watch it the same way by having a mind as a watcher. When we've kept on knowing and watching for a long time, the mind gradually accumulates wisdom. It will gradually become wise, not immediately wise. We have to accumulate points first. We keep on knowing and watching the happiness arise and fall and the suffering arise and fall. See it over and again. We see the wholesomeness arise and fall and the wholesomeness arise and fall. See it over and over for days, months, years, depending on our merit and prestige. When wisdom is strong, we'll know that happiness and suffering are equal. How equal? They are equal in terms of the three characteristics. Everything is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-self. Everything that arises shall exist and fall all the same. Happiness and suffering, good and evil, are equal in terms of the three characteristics. The goodness that arises is subject to the impermanence, unsatisfactory, and non-self. The evil that arises is subject to the impermanence, unsatisfactory, and non-self. They arise, exist, and fall all the same. This is the stage of wisdom cultivation. We must be able to differentiate it from the ethical stage. In the stage of wisdom cultivation, good and evil are equal. But in the ethical stage, good and evil are unequal. We must do good and not do evil. When doing good, making merit, or doing something like this, we'll get happiness. If we do evil or sin, the result is suffering. We're in the world and have to live with this world. Therefore, we should live with the happiness, not with the suffering like hell on earth. When karma causes an effect, bad people, no matter how rich they are or how powerful they used to be, won't be happy. For example, some person had to flee abroad. If happy living abroad, he probably doesn't want to come back to Thailand. In actuality, he isn't happy. Therefore, when we listen to the Dhamma, listen carefully. In the ethical stage of Dhamma, good and evil are unequal. In the stage of Vipassana practice, good and evil are equal in terms of the three characteristics. Therefore, if we say good and evil are equal, or happiness and suffering are equal, it must be appended that they are equal in terms of the three characteristics. When the mind sees the happiness just averagely as something that arises and falls, and see the suffering just averagely as something that arises and falls, at the time the happiness arises, the mind won't be pleased because of knowing that it will fall at any moment. At the time the suffering arises, the mind won't be displeased because of knowing that it will fall at any moment. Everything shall fall. Therefore, the mind will be liberated from the pleasure and displeasure, and the mind will become neutral. When we do the wisdom cultivation in full, the mind becomes neutral. We don't need to pretend to be neutral. There are many levels of neutrality. Neutrality can result from mindfulness. For example, at the time of seeing the mind likes these things or hates these things, we are mindfully aware of liking and hating. When liking, we know, and when hating, we know. The liking and disliking will fall, and then the mind will be neutral. This is the neutrality resulted from mindfulness. Another is the neutrality resulted from samadhi. When entering into absorption and the equanimity, ubekha, the mind will be neutral and be able to let go of even the happiness. However, what I teach is to do the mental development by watching the body, feeling, and mind formation, with the mind as a knower and watcher. Then, we'll attain a neutrality resulted from wisdom. We'll see it over and over again, that everything is equal in terms of the three characteristics. Everything, whether happy or suffering, good or evil, is equal in terms of the three characteristics. When have wisdom at this stage, the mind will be neutral on its own. When we have wisdom, it is called Saikarupe Kanana. Kanana is wisdom. The wisdom resulting in the equanimity of all fabrication is called Saikarupe Kanana. Some of us learn the mental development for a few days and like to brag that they can merely know and see things. They talk gibberish, like everything is merely known and seen. The mind that is able to merely know and see things has to be neutral by having wisdom. Other than that, it isn't mere knowing and seeing. We like when knowing this thing, or we don't like when knowing that thing. When attaining neutrality resulted from wisdom, the mind won't rise and collapse. It's truly neutral. It merely knows and sees every condition arise, exist, and fall equally. Finally, the noble path will arise. The mind will merge into Appana Samadhi. Then, the mind will have the wisdom active in Samadhi for 2 to 3 moments. Finally, the noble path and noble fruit will arise. Before the noble path arises, it feels like we used to be outside. When we see the arising and falling in the absorption, we'll see that this point is still outside. Then, the mind will let go of the outside world and move towards and move into the mind. At this point, it moves quickly and arrives in a flash. In the textbook, this point is called Gotrapa, the knowledge at the moment of the changing of lineage. At the moment of letting go of the formations, it's no longer the worldly person, Putujana. At the moment of moving against the current back to the knowing element but not being there yet, it's not yet the noble one, Ayapukkala. This is the boundary between the worldly person and the noble one. This is the path everyone goes through. One day, we must pass this line. It will move against the current into the knowing mind. When reaching the knowing mind, it will penetrate into the knowing mind. The mental intoxication, asava, and defilements will be destroyed by the noble path, and then the noble fruit will arise for 2 to 3 moments. It will be empty and bright. Some will be filled with joy, some with the equanimity, not equal and not the same. These arise in the mind, don't they? In the beginning of mental development, we must train to have the knowing mind first. When having the knowing mind, we'll learn the mind. The mind works and has the duty to know. To know what? To know the body, feeling, and mind formation. We keep on knowing to the extent that the mind is neutral. Then, the mind will go against the current into the knowing mind, crack open the knowing mind, and attain the Dhamma. The mind that is liberated from the world. Therefore, in practice, we start at the mind, practice at the mind, and end at the mind. When the knowing mind is destroyed, it's called the mind is over, it's destroyed. Therefore, in practice, we start at the mind, know at the mind, and end at the mind. At the point where we know at the mind can know either the body, feeling, or mind formation, but the mind must be the knower. When the mind knows the body, feeling, or mind formation, there will be the reaction. Pleasure or displeasure arising. Be aware of it. When aware of it, the mind will be neutral. Be mindfully aware of it and be neutral by having the mindfulness over and over again. Finally, it will be neutral by having wisdom. When being neutral by having wisdom, the mind will merge into the mind. At this point, the Appana Samadhi will rise. The mind will merge into the mind. Then, the mind will contemplate the mind by seeing internal conditioned things working for 2 to 3 moments. Then, the mind will let go of the mind. Once the mind lets go of the mind will attain the Dhamma. Therefore, in practice, we can't abandon the mind. It starts from the mind by having the mind as the knower. Then we use the knowing mind to cultivate wisdom. When cultivating much wisdom, the mind will merge into the mind at Appana Samadhi. It will do it on its own, since it has no pleasure or displeasure anymore. Then, the defilement will be cut off at the mind of the noble path. Nirvana will be touched by the mind of noble fruit. All of this is the matter of mind. Whether liking or not liking the matter of mind, we can't abandon the matter of the mind. The senior master, Luangpu Pramote said, getting the mind is getting the Dhamma. Not getting the mind is not getting the Dhamma. When getting the mind, we get Dhamma. When not getting the mind, we don't get Dhamma. Therefore, the mind is key to practice. We have to train ourselves every day. Keep on doing the mental exercise and be aware of our own mind to the extent that the mind could be separated to be the knower and watcher. If we do not know how to do it, we do it the easy way. At this moment, we're sitting. We see that the body is the one who sits. We see the body, don't we? The body is the one who sits. Or try moving. The body is the one who moves. Do we feel the body moving? Who is the knower? The mind is the one who knows. Some Abhidhamma teachers also teach well, saying, do you see Rupa standing, Rupa walking, Rupa sitting, Rupa lying down? Who is the knower? Nama is the one who knows. What kind of Nama is the knower? Siddha Nama, mind, is the principal one who composed with several Settasika Nama. mental concomitants. Abhidhamma teaches like this. This way of teaching makes us dizzy, but actually it's right. The mind doesn't arise alone. The mind must arise together with the mental concomitants. In the case of the mind of noble path and fruit, there are many mental concomitants arising together with the mind. The mind doesn't arise alone. There is supramundane mind formation. When the mind formation arises together with a supramundane mind, the mind formation will be supramundane too. Keep knowing, watching, and training our own self. When the body sits, we know that the body is the one who sits. When the body breathes, we know that the body is the one who breathes. Keep watching it on and on. Then, observe that when we know the body sitting, sometimes the mind immerses into the body. Once knowing this, the mind will spring up to be the knower. In case of the body breathing, when we see the body is the one who breathes and is something that is known and watched, the mind will spring up to be the knower. After we have the mind as the knower, when being mindfully aware of the body, we'll see the three characteristics of body. When being mindfully aware of the feeling, we'll see the three characteristics of feeling. When being mindfully aware of the mind formation, we'll see the three characteristics of mind formation, good and evil fabrication. Finally, the mind will merge into the mind. It'll see the truth of mind, that the mind is in the mind. In the end, the mind is in the mind. The mind will become one kind of element, the knowing element. The mind won't be as round as one we used to perceive and train. As a result, we'll finally let go of the mind. We learn about the mind in order to use it as a tool for practice. If unable to let go of the mind, we won't be liberated from the cycle of rebirth. The mind is in the aggregate of consciousness, Vinaya. When learn about the body, feeling, and mind, we'll reach the Dhamma at the end. When letting go of the mind, we'll reach the Dhamma. It's not Duang Tham, the weird practice of seeing these things and those things. Whatever we see, it's not as important as seeing our own defilements. Keep learning it. At the end, the mind will be liberated. We know at the mind, learn at the mind, know at the mind, and then we'll be liberated at the mind. We'll let go of the mind. When reaching the final stage of mental development, we'll let go of the mind. When the mind lets go of the mind, there is nothing to hold on anymore. Therefore, gradually practice every day. Don't be lazy. We must be patient. It's not mysterious knowledge, but profound knowledge. It's not mysterious, since the Buddha had revealed it to us. It's no longer mysterious, but it's profound. In order to learn the profound knowledge like this, we must have the determination. Sometimes learning and sometimes being lazy doesn't work. In the future, after passing many Buddhas and until our faculties are stronger, we will have listened to the Dhamma from one of the Buddhas or disciples. We have a light bulb moment. The light bulb moment is when I've taught. No matter how many Buddha pass, it ends up at the same Dhamma. To know the mind, cut off at the mind, and let go at the mind. It's time to end for today.